Welcome back to Cooking with Gerry. It's a great day for a fire. You can see the fire. It's a grill. We had a lot of rain yesterday and a bit this morning, so it's a perfect time for a fire to warm up my kitchen. And we're going to make bread. Not the traditional kind of bread that has yeast and mostly wheat flour. It's going to be more of a cake batter, but without sugar. So like an unsweetened sponge cake. But before we start getting the batter ready, I want to explain a little bit about the fire. And because we're going to use charcoal, I need the heat, to last long enough for this entire cooking process. Sometimes the charcoal isn't strong enough for the last part, so when that happens I make a small fire beforehand beside the initial fire to get some more hot embers ready to put underneath the bread. So using charcoal, almost everyone I've seen that uses charcoal also starts the charcoal with that lighter fluid or those lighter squares. Now it's possible that there isn't any problem, but it doesn't smell like it. Whenever someone uses that lighter fluid, I can smell it for the entire duration of the cooking process. So I try not to use it. I'm going to show you my technique, which is very simple. First step is making a strong fire. It has to burn for at least 15 minutes or longer, especially if the wood you're using is a little bit damp. This wood is dry. It was outside but covered. The roof is over it. It just absorbed some of the moisture from yesterday and this morning from the rain. So the wood is good for burning, and this specific fire has been burning for at least half an hour. So it's a strong fire. It has to be strong because we're going to separate the wood, make a small square area in the middle, and then put the charcoal on top. And I need the charcoal to be sitting on those hot embers so that they can start getting hot and becoming ready as quickly as possible. So I'm going to do that. Here I have a glove to protect my hand from the heat, and I use these salad tongs. They're the most convenient. I also have this iron rebar, which I put a little handle on one side to make it more comfortable to grip. And so I know which end I use for the fire. One time using a communal grill, I used one of these bars that someone else had used in between me using it, and the person had put the bar the other way, so I grabbed the hot edge and I burned my hand. If you burn your skin, best thing to do is put it under cold running water. But I'm going to use this. First step is you have to separate the fire a little bit. The pieces of wood that have not yet burned, just put them on the outside and flatten the area a little bit that was in the center that has the hot embers. So here's a perfect area. You can't really see it. It's rectangular. And as a bonus for me, I have these peanut shells and pistachio shells that I've collected for the past 2 weeks. I'm going to throw them on first because this is going to burn really well and help the next step. So I'm just going to drizzle them, and they're going to burn real quick. And flatten them out. Here I have charcoal. I prefer not to have the charcoal pieces too big, because then it takes longer to get the heat going. So there was only one piece that was too big. I split it open, and I think it's important to always wash your hands after you handle charcoal. So I'm just going to pour the charcoal. The peanut shells and pistachio are already on fire. I'm going to pour it in the middle. So this one is a little bit over full. It should be enough. And I'm going to separate the charcoal in that rectangular area that had the already burning hot embers. Okay? And the next step, which is important to get the charcoal going as quickly as possible, is to put smaller pieces of wood on top, little branches, which I have right here already prepared. Because when you put the wood on top of it, in about 5 minutes, it's going to be a decent fire. So that way the charcoal has fire on both sides, getting it ready quicker, and without having to use that lighter fluid that I mentioned. You don't need very much, but I'm going to put a decent amount so that we can get this party started. So in about 5 minutes, if you need to, you can flame it and it'll start quicker. Why don't we try that? I'm in an outdoor kitchen, so there's lots of ventilation. You don't have to do this. This is my first time trying it as an experiment with the fanning part. And within about 5 minutes, there will be a good flame. I'm going to move this aside. So I start the charcoal when I'm ready to start the batter. The batter takes about 15 minutes to prepare. The charcoal should take about 15 minutes to prepare. So for me, the timing is perfect. So let's begin with the cake batter. I really enjoy this bread. There's many different variations. I'm going to keep it simple. One part of this process is after about 40 minutes, the batter will become solid enough in the bread pan that I can remove it, because there's not enough heat contained to get in the middle of the bread. So I remove it from the bread pan. I'll either slice it lengthwise or slice it crosswise and then put it back on the fire. And by that time, the coals, the charcoal, are almost at their end, so it's perfect combination of heat. Adding the different ingredients I don't do, because during that slicing process and flipping it, many times the seeds, nuts, whatever you want to use, fall off and end up in the fire, which I don't want, because dried nuts, seeds, etc. are expensive. So if you're doing this in an oven, for sure, please experiment adding different ingredients. I have here some bean stew. It's got lentils, split peas, peanuts, and black corn. This could be really nice in the batter. It would be a nice moist bread. Like I said, almost a sponge cake. In the oven, it's much easier. In this kind of process, the fire's going really well. I don't put stuff. Also because when a seed, or if you like raisins or dried fruit, when it's too close to the burning charcoal, it can burn a little bit. What we're going to do is use the liquid from this bean stew as part of the bread batter. Normally I'll just use water, but when I have something like this available, it'll add a little bit of flavor and some nutrition. So, 2 eggs going in. This egg had 2 yolks, a little bonus. Yeah, 2 eggs go in, both eggs are good. I took a risk. Normally what I'll do is I'll crack the egg in a separate container and then pour it in. That way I have that moment to make sure the egg is okay. But in this situation, there's nothing else, so if the egg was rotten, I would only lose the egg instead of everything else that was in it if I put the egg in at the end. I like to always wash my hands after handling eggs. because I don't know how well the eggs are cooked. Sorry, how well the eggs are cleaned, and I got a bit of yolk on my hands. So I'm going to add about half a teaspoon of pink salt. Half a teaspoon. I also like to add butter, which I don't have at the moment, so I'm going to add virgin olive oil. About 2 tablespoons. Maybe it was a bit less than 2 tablespoons. And I'm going to stir. Can you see the fire? It took about 5 minutes or less to get those branches on top burning. And a little bit of this liquid, like I said, it's going to give it a dark color. I don't want to use that spoon. So I'm blocking the other food ingredients from going in. You don't want too much water. A couple of the lentils went in, not a big deal. So it's possible I'll need more of this liquid. I'll just move it to one side. Quick mix again. And now it's time for the dry ingredients. What you use depends on what you have, your taste preference, what you can find, and obviously what you can afford. Some of these powders can be quite expensive, but they last for a long time. If you can't find this specific one that I have, you'll find other ones, or you can order them online. This one here is kaniwa. It's a seed that's been ground to a powder. That was about 2 tablespoons. Part of this process with these videos I'm trying to teach is you don't have to be specific. Many people have told me they don't bake because they believe the measurements have to be so precise, and they hesitate. I've been baking for about 30 years, never as a job, always just for hobby and for eating better food than what I would buy at the store and for sharing. So with that 30 years of experience, it's fairly easy for me at the end of the process when I've got everything together. If I find it's too liquidy or too solid, I can make adjustments. This is alfalfa powder. Lots of good value, nutritional value. That was also about 2 tablespoons. Here is something that might be strange for a bread, but I really enjoy the flavor. This is pure cocoa powder. I only want about a tablespoon because cocoa is fairly bitter. Has a really nice flavor. So that's about a tablespoon, maybe a little bit less. This is local. I'm in a perfect climate for growing cocoa plants. On this property there are about 30 cocoa trees up on the main level. This is sacha inchi powder. It's called sacha inchi flour, but it's more like a powder similar to almond flour. It's a nut. It grows normally in the Andes. Different combination of, say, an almond, a Brazil nut, and a walnut. That kind of flavor and consistency, hardness. This is very good. That has lots of nutritional properties. Nutritious properties. So that's it for these seed and nut powders. And I'm going to add a little bit of baking soda, which is the replacement instead of using yeast. Yeast has the potential to ferment in your stomach, causing air and causing potential digestion problems. So that's why I don't use yeast. I'm going to use a dry spoon, and I'll put about less than half a tablespoon. And then I'm going to put also some wheat flour. Coals are almost perfect. I have white flour and whole wheat flour. The straining process is necessary. First of all, the baking soda can sometimes be in clumps. And if you leave it in clumps, there would be bites that are a bit bitter because baking soda is a bit bitter. But also because some of these seeds and nuts, the powder, doesn't get to a pure powder. Some of the seeds shells or nut shells or cocoa shells accidentally either fall in or don't get properly removed when they're breaking up the part to get what's inside. So you can see there's a little bit here. It could be crunchy in a bad way, especially if you have an unfilled cavity. So I just threw that in the garbage. And here is whole wheat flour. A whole wheat flour is also necessary with this process to help bind the batter. If I were to do it just pure seeds, nut powder, it's gonna fall apart. If I were to add 4 more eggs, for example, the eggs would bind everything together. What's that, 3, 4, let's put 5. 5 of the whole wheat powder, flour, excuse me, and we'll put 5 of the wheat flour, the white wheat flour. If you're doing this in an oven, you can keep it pure and put much less of this wheat flour or none at all. The issue with the wheat flour, the science says, when it enters your stomach, it will very quickly convert into sugar, which will very quickly raise your blood sugar level, creating a bit of disturbance inside the body. The body wants to stay level, wants to stay balanced. If there's too much sugar, by way of actual sugar, or this kind of wheat flour or rice or potato, or any kind of pasta, if there's too much sugar, the body goes into a bit of an emergency situation to try and remove that sugar from the blood. And it then gets stored in the body as fatty tissue. So that's why I try not to eat flour and to minimize the use of the wheat flour. So now I'm mixing everything together and the charcoal is perfect. We're almost ready. And it looks almost perfect. I just need a little bit more liquid. As I mentioned in the beginning, without being precise, you can judge when you have everything together at the end. So that should be enough. Yeah, that looks perfect. I'm going to come a bit closer. So here it is. It's a fairly dry mixture. I mean, if I had an oven, I could put a little bit more flour, do a bit of kneading, and shape it into a traditional sized bread loaf, either rounded or rectangular. But I'm using a bread pan, and it'll have the shape in the end of that bread pan. So that's ready. Now, the next part is how I like to put it in the bread pan. Here's my bread loaf pan. And here is a piece of wax, well no, it's oven paper. My experience in Canada, they have parchment paper and wax paper. The wax paper seems to always smoke when I put it in the oven, so I would always use parchment paper if I could. This is very similar to parchment paper. So I put the paper on the upside down bread loaf, and I'll make the creases so that when I flip over the bread pan, try and center the piece of oven paper. When I flip over the bread pan, it'll fit. Kind of like wrapping a present. The corner edges of a present. That's what I'm doing. When I flip it over, and I can put the paper in the bread loaf pan much easier, and I get nice corners at the bottom. If you're putting it in the oven, you can keep the extra part of the paper that's on top, but because I'm going to enclose it, this would be an obstacle for this specific cooking method. So I remove it with a pair of scissors. And this way with the paper, it'll come right out to make it much easier for the next process. So, here I have the bread pan with the oven paper, and I'm just going to spoon as evenly as I can the bread batter into the bread loaf pan. I don't do very much batter because this cooking process is a very inefficient transfer of heat. So if I put a lot of batter, it's gonna cook really slowly. And I want this to cook in about 40 minutes so that I have enough charcoal, hot charcoal, for the second process, which is when it goes directly onto the grill. So here's what it looks like now. I'm just going to flatten it so that it becomes basically one unit, one loaf. Carefully trying not to disturb the placement of the oven paper. I'm holding it with one hand while I push down. Now, because of this consistency, it's not going to rise too much, which is fine for me. I like a dense slice of bread rather than the airy, fluffy, puffy bread that's available at most grocery stores. So there we go. That's ready. I'll just get that last little bit off the spoon. And that's it. Let me show you again. So now it's flattened and it's ready for the oven. Or, in this case, the grill. So here is a container I built to protect my bread pan. It's possible, I've seen them before. You can buy those disposable aluminum bread pans. It's going to be kind of in this shape, made of a thicker aluminum than you find with aluminum foil. You can have one or two of those if you don't want to have this whole process. But I would still recommend you try and find some way to cover it to try and contain the heat. This was one of those big oval serving trays with a big the high walls edges. I cut the rim because it was a rolled up aluminum and I couldn't get it straight, so I cut that, and then I cut this oval in half and I shaped it to be able to fit it almost perfectly in this specific bread loaf pan, and I've used it 6 times so far. It's got a little bit of charring, but it's still in really good shape. So if you take care of your items, you can reuse and not have big expense. Now I'm just going to move the charcoal around and make sure everything's ready. And yeah, this charcoal's perfect. I'm going to close the grill, and this goes on top. So this process, depending on how hot the charcoal is, how much batter you've put in the bread loaf pan, it's going to take about 40 minutes before the batter is solid enough that I can remove it, and we'll go through that process in my 40 minutes, your instant next segment. In the oven, preheat the oven to about 370, and it'll take about 40 minutes. Another good thing about showing you this method is if you're camping, this could be a really fun activity for you to share with your children or your friends. And the end product, you're sharing this really tasty and much healthier loaf of bread with who's ever with you at your camping trip. It does take a bit of time, but if you're camping, that means you're on holidays, which means time shouldn't be as much of an issue as if you're in your life back at home in the city, having to work, or very busy schedules for most people. So that's another reason I wanted to show this process using the grill and charcoal. You can use wood, just be careful with the flame. The flame, first of all, will burn the bread pan and the protective layer. Probably also cook one side of the batter more than the other side. I will be spinning the bread loaf pan during these 40 minutes because I don't know exactly if the heat is evenly distributed. And what's also going to happen is, because it's contained, the bread batter, there's going to be a little bit of moisture on the inside, some humidity created during the cooking process. That humidity is not a problem because the next step will remove all of that humidity, and I'll show you in the next video segment. So that's it for now. Now it's the waiting game. Be careful when you're spinning it. I'll use these gloves all the time. Sometimes during the 40 minutes I'll have to adjust the charcoal, but it's the waiting game. So we'll come back in about 40 minutes and continue with this homemade or camping site made healthier than normal bread. Awesome. It's been almost exactly 40 minutes and we're ready for the next step. So I'm going to put my glove on to protect my hand, and resting it on this piece of cement so it doesn't burn the wood. I'm also going to move the charcoal around a little bit. Alright, to get the unburned charcoal, which we'll need for the next step. So I'm going to remove the container top Okay, I'll show you what it looks like. Really dark in color because of the various combinations of seed powder and nut powder, and because of this liquid from the bean stew. And then because of the oven paper, I can slide it out. And this is clean, which is great because I won't have to scrub cleaning too much, and it prolongs the life of the bread pan. And the container I made with the thick aluminum foil oval serving tray, I can use it again. It'll be the 7th time, including today, that I've used these two containers to protect my bread pan. And I can peel off the oven paper. And there it is. Smells great. Now I'm going to grab a knife and I'm going to slice the bread, because inside the batter isn't fully cooked. With this process, compared to an oven, a lot of the heat escapes. So part of my process is to cut it in half and then put that middle part over the coals, so we can get a fully cooked bread, and we'll also have those nice grill marks. And because the charcoal is almost to the end of its heat capacity, it's not going to burn. It's going to give a perfect brown grill mark. So that's it. I've cut it in half. Did you see? And this will go back on the fire. There is an option, excuse me, to use something like this to put them on if the pieces are too small, but these pieces are big enough, they won't fall through the grill that's already there. So I'm not going to use this. I might use it later, I probably will, to put the bread on so when it's done, so that the air can reach to it, because putting it on a flat surface, the bottom part there'll be condensation and the bread won't turn out as nice. It could be a little bit soggy on the bottom. This bread looks great. Perfect little air bubbles created by the baking soda. And the last piece. And these are going to go back over the charcoal. And in about 5 minutes, I'm going to flip them over, because the other part, the top and the bottom, also hasn't received direct heat from the charcoal. So both sides are going to get additional heat, additional cooking. And that's the second part. And that's going to be fairly quick. Depends on how thick the bread is, depends on how much heat there's still left in the charcoal. I wanted to say something I have said in previous videos, but important now to repeat it again. I've read a book by Dr. Mark Harman, Harman, which is very useful. I recommend it to everyone. The book is called Food, What the Heck Should I Eat? Lots of great information, helped me a lot. There's a lot of confusing media and information about what's healthy and what's not healthy. One part of this book, he explains that regular loaf of bread you buy from the grocery store, one slice of that bread has the same effect on your body as 1 tablespoon of sugar. So imagine 1 tablespoon of sugar and you eat it. That's the same thing's going to happen in your body if you eat 1 slice of bread. If your morning breakfast is toast, that's 2 slices of bread, which means 2 tablespoons of sugar. It can be very hard to understand how 1 piece of bread can be the same as 1 tablespoon of sugar. The information is there for you to learn. If you do a search, I'm typing on a keyboard because we have internet now, lots of good information. So if you're having toast for breakfast, 2 pieces of toast, you're starting your day with the equivalent of 2 tablespoons of sugar. If you also put strawberry jam, for example, or any kind of jam, honey, which can be healthy, but it's a lot of sugar. If you're putting yogurt, which has fruit added to it, if you're adding that store-bought peanut butter, natural, pure peanut butter would be okay. But that store-bought peanut butter that's available in most grocery stores has a lot of sugar, a lot of syrup, and a lot of other unhealthy ingredients. If you're putting those on your toast, the toast is 2 tablespoons of sugar. The jam is going to be a lot of sugar. The unnatural sweetened peanut butter, a lot of sugar. The information that I'll explain right now is there's hormones in your body that get released if the blood sugar has too much sugar or if it has too little. The names of these hormones are insulin, which most people know about, and glucagon, which many people don't know about. It's spelled G-L-U-C-A-G-O-N, glucagon. Please consider doing an internet search, the difference between insulin and glucagon. It's very useful information if you're interested in learning how to eat healthier. Basically, it's balancing every meal with something that's sugar and something that's not sugar. What's sugar besides actual sugar is bread, your traditional bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, fruits and vegetables, but they're natural and they have a lot of fiber, so fruits and vegetables are not so bad. Especially vegetables, there's a lot of fiber. The conversion to sugar is much slower. And what's not sugar? Seeds, nuts, meat, eggs. So the rule to help your body maintain the natural level it wants to is to have a little bit of sugar, but mostly no sugar. So if you want that potato, you need to put some stuff on it or beside it, eat with it, that's not sugar. For example, a piece of chicken. If you're having a bag of potato chips, for example, which is potato that's been sliced very thin and deep fried, number one, the deep frying process makes the food very unhealthy, usually too much salt. But the potato itself, it's very quickly, because it's so thin, going to convert into sugar, which is unhealthy for the body. So that's why I don't eat normal bread. I love bread, so I take the extra time to make a homemade bread. There is a little bit of wheat flour, which, as I've explained, converts very quickly into sugar, but there's a lot of other seed and nut powders, as well as the olive oil I used in the batter. And I'm going to have it today with my lunch, which is very balanced. The bean stew I told you about, and here is going to be the second part, which is red and white quinoa, amaranth, beetroot, purple cabbage, and green cabbage. So very balanced. So please consider learning about insulin and glucagon. Now I'm going to turn the bread over so it can have direct heat. I'll show you. It's a little bit hot. We're seeing a little bit of the grill marks. And because there's more heat concentrated in the middle, I will rotate the position of these pieces of bread. So there's more in the middle, so the ones that were on the outside are going to go into the middle. So that's going to continue for about 5 minutes. I don't think I need to have another segment. I'll show you what my lunch will be, just to explain in a few more moments the connection between glucagon and insulin, and give you a tiny bit more information to help you make better food choices. This bread's going to be awesome. I wish you were here to taste the bread with me, but you'll have to try it at home, and I'm pretty sure your family and you are going to love it. But before I end, I want to also say you can make a bigger batch. You can make 4 times what we did earlier. Put it into a larger rectangular or square cake tin or oven proof tin, and it might take a little bit longer to bake because there's a more quantity of batter, but once it's cooked, and if you're using the oven, you don't have to do this process of cutting it open because an oven has the heat contained. But when you've done this process with the bigger cake tin, cut the batter, which has now become a bread, but not really bread, cut it into squares, and then cut it again. And if you slice it down the middle, as I did, it's very convenient. You can put it in the freezer, and then if you want to have a healthier breakfast than toast, take it from the freezer and you can put it directly into the toaster or toaster oven, or let it thaw for about 5 minutes and then lightly fry it with some butter or coconut oil or virgin olive oil. Also very good for a sandwich. If you were to put your normal sandwich middle instead of using the bread, because a sandwich has 2 pieces of bread, right? And that means with each slice of bread being a tablespoon of sugar. A sandwich has 2 tablespoons of sugar, and if you're putting peanut butter and jam in the middle, that's a lot more sugar. If you're putting something that doesn't have sugar in the middle, it's better, but still, each slice of bread has about 1 tablespoon of sugar. I mean, there's not sugar in the actual bread dough. What I'm trying to express is when it goes into your stomach, into your body, with the digestion process, that slice of bread has the same effect as a tablespoon of sugar. Please consider that, and maybe you can change that morning breakfast from toast and that traditional lunch of a sandwich and have something much healthier. Final segment of this video, here's what I have for my lunch. As I explained earlier, and the bread, it's going to be a really tasty lunch, very balanced. 2 things I should mention. Number 1, depending on the quality of your bread pan, this is a low quality bread pan. Probably better not to put it in a dishwasher. And you'll see that there's an edge that's rolled over. It's important to remove the water from this, because water, if you wash it by hand, will get stuck underneath this rolled up rim. So I shake it, I bang it, and I also blow it to get rid of the water. And I put it in the dish drying tray on an angle so that all the water will hopefully drop out. Depending on the quality of your bread pan. I was just saying hi to a friend. He's in time perfect for lunch because he'll get to try this bread that's still warm. The last thing I wanted to say is if you do want to do this for your camping trip, you don't have to bring all the separate flours and powders. You can experiment at home first or not, so that you know what combination you like. And in some kind of container or a bag, you can have the dry stuff already prepared. And then once you're ready to make the bread at your campsite, that's when you add the eggs, the oil or the butter, and some salt and some water. Add them together. You might have some kind of camping pot that you can use, or maybe you've actually brought a bowl. So you can prepare everything beforehand. It makes it much easier. And then once you're sitting by your lovely campfire, maybe someone's got a guitar, it's always nice, you can make some bread. So that's it. The two of us are ready for lunch, and we're gonna enjoy it. Okay, hopefully you stayed tuned and didn't shut off your YouTube video, because I wanted to add one final segment to this bread making video. Number one, the last segment I said it's important to remove the water, but I didn't say why. This here has a thick steel wire going around to hold the shape of the bread pan, and that steel wire will rust if there's water left inside. There is still going to be a little bit of rust, but you can minimize the rust by getting rid of the water. I wanted to also show you another bread pan. It's this one. I have the small one. There was a bigger one at the store, but since I'm usually by myself, I only need a small one. And if you can imagine, using this kind of pan, there are other options available. The first one that comes to my mind is pizza, but it won't be a traditional pizza because there's no yeast and there's more ingredients than just the flour. This same thing, after I wash it, I shake it out, I blow it to try and get rid of the water to minimize any rust that would happen. And here is what it looks like. I have it covered because I also have ripe plantain, which is here. And ripe plantain, especially after it's been cooked, is a magnet for fruit flies. So here it is, looks like a banana, but it's not a banana. It's green plantain that has rotted a little bit, and they call it mature plantain. A lot of the sugars have concentrated during the ripening / rotting process. So I have it covered so not so many fruit flies, and I keep it in a bag. Once again, not so many fruit flies. I don't normally have it. A friend was here. He rented a room for about 5 days, and when he left, he didn't want to travel with his leftover food. So he gave me 2 plantains and a small bag of white rice, which I think I'll use for the next video. I also don't normally have white rice because it's one of those foods that very quickly turns into sugar. I want to show you a technique using beetroot, which makes the rice this really fun red color. So let's get to it. Here I have it covered, as I said. I'll move this aside. This is what the bread comes out as. It's round, a little bit of the oven paper stuck on the bottom, which I can peel off. And pizza, you could then put toppings on it, whatever you have available if you're camping. Depends on what you brought with you or what you can find available. You can also make it a pie kind of cake. If you add sugar, maybe you have some chocolate chips that you brought with you. Obviously adding the sugar makes it less healthy, but still can be very enjoyable. And here is the ripe plantain that has to be cooked. I put it at the end of the cooking process of the bread, and I used the oven paper that I had used on this so that the bread was easier to remove. And here I had the bread pan wrapped in this tin foil that I've used now 3 times. You can see a little bit of the grill mark. There are now 2 holes, maybe 3, but I can still use it again, probably, just to minimize waste and help our planet by providing her with less garbage. So that's what I wanted to show. This form of what I might do. No, if it was thicker, I could slice it and open it up, but it's too thin. So my breakfast will be some of this, half maybe, and the plantain I'm going to mix with this avocado and add a little bit of pure cocoa powder. And then I'll also drizzle on some extra virgin oil. Healthy breakfast. There is a fair bit of sugar in the ripe plantain, but the main thing is to balance having a little bit of sugar, but mostly not sugar. So that's the final portion of this bread making video, and we will see you soon.